and gentlemen, welcome to Tony D'Angelo's PM Coast to Coast. Now, here's your host, Tony D'Angelo.
And a very good afternoon to you up and down the stations of the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network up and down the East Coast. I'm your host, Tony D'Angelo, and this is Tony D'Angelo's PM Coast to Coast. And more than pleased to be back with you today, as Hubert Horatio Metrodome Humphrey would say when he was running for president 50 years ago. He was pleased as punch. And I am pleased as punch to be back with you today after my birthday hiatus of last week. And man, I'm even more pleased to be with my guest. Her name, Dr. Laurie Nadel. Laurie is a former broadcast journalist, a CBS News producer, who has taken to the field of psychology and psychotherapy, dealing with people who have trouble managing acute stress. Doesn't that sound like America in 2018? Man, oh man, I'm hoping we don't run out of tape talking to Dr. Laurie, but one of the things that we aren't going to run out of here is good music. And I'll tell you, I got the impressions coming at you from 1965, singing about a special lady. The Woman's Got Soul. We'll be right back with Dr. Laurie after a retromercial, right after this.
The charms of the ladies of high society, but the woman got soul, worth all money and gold, and all the love that I have belong to the woman with soul.
Jimmy, please, not now. I'm too busy. Control yourself. Sure you have a headache, tense, irritable, but don't take it out on him.
You need Anacin for fast relief. The big difference in Anacin makes a big difference in the way you feel. Minutes after taking Anacin, headache pain's gone, so tension's gone, irritability's gone. You're in control again. You see, Anacin is like a doctor's prescription. That is a combination of ingredients, the pain reliever most recommended by doctors, plus an extra ingredient missing from leading aspirins, still missing with buffering. Combined in Anacin to relieve pain, to relax tension, soothe irritability. You get fast relief. You keep control. Yes, the big difference in Anacin makes a big difference in the way you feel.
Ladies and gentlemen, up and down the stations of the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network, I have a special guest for you today. Her name, Dr. Laurie Nadel. Laurie has a wonderful background and an even better present career. Laurie was a working journalist for 20 years, a writer-producer for CBS with sort of an alma mater for both of us for 8 years. And then Laurie is now a psychotherapist and is working in areas where folks need help with coping with acute stress. I said in the intro, that is probably life in these here United States in 2018. And I'm so pleased that Laurie has decided to come and visit us. Laurie, good rainy morning to you. How are you doing?
Well, thank you so much for that great introduction. I am staying out of the rain. In fact, a little bit of news. I joke that the news god kind of follows me around. And Monday is the 6th anniversary of Hurricane Sandy, where I lost my home in Long Beach, New York. And I was supposed to give a talk today at the Long Beach Library, and it was canceled because of the northeaster. So I am always affected, it seems, by breaking news. It impacts my life in oblique ways, even though I left the news business decades ago.
And I know you like to be known as Dr. Laurie, and
Yes.
I'm so pleased to have you. Now, Your life, your growing up, your whatever you want to call it, young adulthood, scholastic life, how do you, where was it? What was it like? What were the things you liked? And what brought you to CBS and then to this later career?
Hi, well, thank you so much for that great question. I grew up in Brooklyn, and or we call it the Holy City of Brooklyn. It used to be known as the City of Churches.
Mm-hmm.
And
the New York Met emblem has churches, yes.
yes, and it's kind of a joke when I call it the Holy City of Brooklyn, because in the 1950s and 60s, it wasn't a cool place to grow up. Now Brooklyn is very cool and super expensive. But I grew up on a block, a middle-class block with a lot of trees and very kind of very solid brick houses. And we had about 30 or 40 kids within 3 years of each other. And so we all grew up, running in and out of each other's houses and playing in the middle of the street, learning how to bike and roller skate in the street. And so I went on to go to college close to New York City. I went to Sarah Lawrence College and did my senior year in England. And after I graduated, I kind of fell into journalism at a time when women, especially in England, women were not expected to be in the workplace at all. So the only roles that women were allowed to have were secretarial and maybe a librarian.
Interesting.
And somehow or other, I decided that I wanted to be a news writer, and I was able to convince the editor-in-chief to give me a shot at news writing, and that became my career for the next 20 years, off and on.
So you were really kind of living the Mary Tyler Moore experience in real life.
That's right. In fact, I kind of really identify with Murphy Brown more than Mary Tyler Moore. And I joke, actually, because I say, look, if Murphy Brown married Crocodile Dundee, that was my marriage for 15 years. We were married and we lived in Brooklyn, and it was a great time for a long time. And then when we got divorced after 15 years, I went back to school. I left CBS News in '87, and I went back to school and studied. I got two degrees through independent study, and decided that having watched so many people suffering from catastrophic events, as you know, when you sit in a newsroom, even before the digital era, there were like 20 monitors on the wall, and you could see what was going on all over the planet. And it was, it was a bombing, it was an earthquake, it was a flood, it was a mudslide, it was a plane crash. It was, you're just looking at bodies sometimes for 8-10 hours a day. I used to wonder what happens to these people whose lives have been shattered by the building that fell down while they were walking on their way to work, or the person who got caught in that horrible accident. It occurred to me that they would probably need some kind of long-term support after something like that. And so when I went back to school, I focused my specialty on helping people recovering from traumatic events. And in 1991, I opened a private practice in Manhattan, and I've been working ever since.
And I can only imagine. I know where I was on September 11, 2001. As a matter of fact, I could tell you pretty clearly what was happening to me on November 22nd, 1963. But I can only imagine what that day was like for you and what the aftermath of that was.
Well, the day itself was, again, I kind of joke that, I am affected directly or indirectly sometimes by so many major events. But I was teaching at NYU School of Journalism at the time. The NYU was close to my office, and so I was able to manage both. And I was heading in to work, and I was going to pick up a friend at LaGuardia, and her plane had to land in Atlanta, and the city was closed off, and so classes were canceled for a couple of weeks. And my office was actually across the street from St. Vincent's Hospital at the time, and so it was in the FEMA zone. And unfortunately, when I was allowed back into the building, when they opened up the northern edge of the FEMA zone and we could get back into the office, everything was covered with the dust from the towers. And that has had long-term health effects for myself and for my partner.
That's and you've persevered and you've carried on.
Yes, I really kind of try to manage around whatever this particular difficulty is or whatever the chronic condition is. But in 2003 to 2005, I ran a program for teenagers whose fathers were killed in the World Trade Center, and that was very inspiring, actually, to be able to be part of to contribute to the healing of grief that was as massive as the traumatic grief after September 11th, and to be part of this incredible program that was run at a local hospital called the WTC Family Center. I got to work with incredible people, and really was such an inspiring experience to get to know these kids and to see how they became friends with each other, which was really kind of the goal of the program, because having shared that life experience, they will always be able to be there for each other no matter what happens in their lives going forward.
Now, you've been through it, you've dealt with stress and trauma in your own life. September 11th, divorces and things. Now, I will sit in this barn studio and then I'll go back into the house. And, I'll whatever the news of the day is, and it's sort of like, what is today's powder keg? What's about to happen? And there's all kinds of things going here and there. It's almost, Dr. Laurie, like you look at it and you say, it's almost like watching a movie. You know something's going to happen at some point, but you don't know when and you don't know exactly where, but it's just, you just have this feeling. And we live in this world of where we're constantly being... you worked in media, I worked in media, where it's like, well, here's your stress for today. Here's your thing to get excited for today. How does one cope with that? I know in reading about you, there's something called emotional first aid after a trauma, and to me it gets so mind-boggling and confusing, and yet I have to pay my bills, I have to service my clients, I have to do my work here, I have to supervise people. What are some tips we can all kind of do to keep ourselves sane in this crazy world?
Well, I think my new book, which is called The 5 Gifts, Discovering Hope, Healing, and Strength When Disaster Strikes, and I'm really honored that Dan Rather wrote the foreword for me for my book, and I think that one of the themes of the book, and I think to kind of give an overview, is what I say to people is we're living in very unstable and turbulent times, and the whole environment, whether we're looking at the social environment, the financial environment, the climate, the actual like physical climate, the political climate, the behavioral climate, how people are acting out in very strange and weird ways, unexpectedly. The instability is something that we are not used to. So there's a mindset that we can learn by looking at the values of people in other countries who have lived with political stability, economic hardship, war, famine, repression, dictatorship. People have gotten through these periods of instability and uncertainty and turbulence. And I think that some of the people who I've interviewed in this book include a teacher of mine who was a psychologist working after the tsunami in Bali, and coming to terms with these events that we are helpless to prevent takes something that I call the gift of humility. And with humility, we have to accept that there are forces beyond our control, that there are things that happen that are really bigger than we are, and that we didn't attract this, necessarily because, we didn't attract the hurricane with our negative thinking. There may have been decisions that caused us to pollute the environment collectively. But when something happens that affects us directly, it's important to have humility. And I think, when I watch the news and I see, all the craziness that's happening, and I start to feel tense about it, I tell myself, this is a period, this is a cycle of turbulence, and eventually it's going to wear itself out. But, we're in the middle of it, I think. I hope we're not at the beginning of it, but I think we're kind of, it's certainly with climate change, I think we're kind of probably in the I don't think we're right at the beginning of the cycle, but we're definitely in a cycle that's going to run its course. And it's important to have certain tools. The one that I recommend to people that anybody can do and your listeners can do when you start to feel stressed is to breathe in a color that you find comforting, and to feel that color traveling anywhere in your body where you're holding tension, whether it's your shoulders, whether it's your stomach, whether it's your heart, and just allow that band of color. You don't have to see it. You can even just say the word and feel that color. And then as you exhale, release the tension, release the stress by breathing out a different color. And people find, and you can do this with your kids, people find that when you breathe in that soothing color and then you release whatever you want to get rid of by breathing out a different color, that it doesn't take very long for you to feel calmer. It really takes the edge off.
Well, you're ringing several bells in my head, and of course, if it's my head, I'm going to come out with probably a couple of moldy oldies. The first thing with respect to trauma and stress is that I'm an old movie fan. My father ran movies. I have an excellent longtime friend who's a very scholarly movie historian, and there are the movies that women watch, there are the movies that men watch, and there's the movies that women and men watch together. And I'm married for the second time. My first wife, Jane, passed on in 2011. My wife, Kathy, and I have watched the same movie that I watched with Jean, called Mrs. Miniver. It was made, I think, in 1942.
Oh, sure, yeah.
And it was that whole thing of the resolute, and this is something that men and women can watch, of the resolute Brits, that their world's coming apart, but they're still holding their garden parties. They're still, Greer Garson is out there doing the flowers. It's like, it's that British thing of, we will carry on and we will live our lives as normally as I can. Is that good advice?
Oh, I think that's excellent advice. I mean, some of the people who I've interviewed for the book, people from England who grew up during and right after World War II, and one of my friends, we were roommates when we both worked in the newsroom in London, and she said that she remembers as a child when they had flour was rationed, and when people got married or had birthdays, they didn't have enough flour to make a cake. So they cut out cardboard cakes and cardboard candles. And so I think that, being resolute and also creativity sometimes comes to us, and it can be an inspirational force in the middle of catastrophic events. So finding creative ways to cope with shortages and limitations. If we look at where we are right now, just for example, the most brilliant creativity is coming from our comics. We look at the political satire, which is really blossoming now as an art form. You can look at any night. You've got Stephen Colbert, and you've got Seth Meyers, and you've got Bill Maher, and you have all these people who are making who are really making us laugh in a very poignant way. But it alleviates that feeling of helplessness. And I think that carrying on, as another friend from London said to me, during the 70s, when the IRA was bombing the subways or the tube in London, and people, every day there were explosions or there were bomb threats. And she said, well, we would just get up and, to say that you weren't going to work because there was a bomb threat would be like saying that you weren't going to work because it was raining. And, the other day, I was actually scheduled to be interviewed by CBS Radio, and I got bumped because of the bomb scare. you know, all the reporters were assigned to cover, you know, the horrible bomb, you know, the bombs that were discovered around. I think there were a couple that were in New York or the New York area. Robert De Niro certainly was in Manhattan, and so I think it's important to keep in mind that you cannot stop your life. And a friend of mine once called after 9/11 and said, "Don't go to work this weekend. There's going to be an attack in Penn Station." And I said the same thing. I said, "Look, if I didn't leave my house whenever there was a bomb threat, you know, I'd never leave my house." Because after 9/11, and I write about this in a chapter that I call Gas Masks and Dom Perignon. A friend of mine who worked for the State Department was told after 9/11 she was issued a gas mask, and she was told to bring in 3 days' supply of food in case they went into lockdown because of a terrorist attack. And so she brought in a bottle of Dom Perignon champagne and some caviar, and she kept it at her desk. And she said, "You know, if I'm going out in style." And I kind of thought that was very creative and very inspiring. And I love this proverb. There's a Hungarian proverb that says, "If a bullet has your name on it, no knife can ever kill you." And I think that, you know, there's a certain amount of, you know, almost like I wouldn't say fatalism, but you kind of have to.
There's a piece in that. Yeah.
Yeah, you have to kind of proceed with inner knowing that we don't control, you know, our destiny when it comes to life and death, and we have to keep going when things get turbulent and uncertain, because otherwise, honestly, if we get paralyzed, then the terrorists have won. Because terrorism, you know, is, whether it's domestic terrorism or terrorism by a foreign agent, it is a war of the mind. That's why they call it terrorism. You know, it's designed to make us afraid. And I think that some of the political strategy right now, if you can call it a strategy, is to kind of basically feed on the fears in the population and to get people scared and agitated because it serves some kind of purpose, allegedly.
Well,
I don't understand what purpose it could serve, but certainly stirring up fear seems to be escalating. And I think the only way we can counter fear is by moving forward and taking care of the things that we need to do in our lives, because if a bullet has our name on it, no knife can ever kill us.
And I'm back to the British. In my career, I've had two very distinguished British gentlemen as clients, one now deceased, the other now living. The now deceased client was a Yale physician who spent his high school years studying under a table during the Battle of Britain. And the one who is now living was a little bit older. He was a fighter pilot. He was up every night in Britain for, 3-4 years. Met his wife, believe it or not, as she was his airplane mechanic. Talk about trust and stress. And both of them told me the same thing. It's like, how did you do that? And they both looked at me and said, you know, in their very distinguished British accents and inflections, "Tony, we believed in tomorrow."
Yes. And I think that, I think that's very important to understand that this is a cycle, and that all cycles, change, and everything in life has duality. Right now we're in a period of instability, but eventually that like two sides of a coin, or the North and South Pole, the opposite side of instability is stability. Mm-hmm. And eventually, we will work our way through this, and it will become more important to people to get to a new place of stability and a new hope for tomorrow. And I think that, when this kind of when the frenzy kind of wears itself out, which it will do, and the environment starts to kind of settle down in some way, or we've developed different ways of navigating we're going to find tremendous innovation and creativity because the whole landscape will have changed. We will be different as a result of having gone through this time of political instability, because we will have a deeper appreciation for the values and the rights that our democracy has granted us. I mean, up until now, I think most of us just kind of took it for granted.
For sure.
And now, everybody we have to live fiercely. This is one of the things I find fascinating about this particular time in history, where the tempo is so uneven and unstable, is that we have to live fiercely. We have to stand up for what we believe in. We have to believe that there could be that we have a contribution to make to a better tomorrow, and everybody is being called to stand up for something that matters, because everything is in turmoil. And so we have to center ourselves. We have to breathe in the color, and we have to find a way. I suggest in my book that we spend 5 minutes a day doing something that makes us smile, or 5 minutes a day doing something that makes us feel calm. And I call that little period of 5 minutes, I call it a soul vitamin. Do something to feed your soul for 5 minutes a day. And you'll find that the turbulence it doesn't occupy the central place in your heart. If you give yourself 5 minutes a day to basically reflect, or to calm down, or to be at peace, or to be happy, or to do something for somebody else, that's going to give you a completely different, if you like, different energy, a sense of purpose. It's going to alleviate a lot of the feeling of helplessness that you have just from watching the news.
Now, it's, and you bring to mind actually my second moldy oldie of the day, and going back to my young adulthood, before there were people like Dr. Laurie, if you were having, shall we say, emotional or mental issues, I mean, my cure for that growing up, having absolutely no money and maybe a little bit of gas in the car, was to either walk or drive down to the Pennsylvania drugstore in Stamford, Connecticut, drink a malted milk, which of course was not good for me, and then go over and putter around at the paperback books until the people that were there got tired of me and kicked me out. But yet I still remember those books, and when I was able to buy them, I bought them. I bought the Dale Carnegie books. I bought one particular book that I still have somewhere here. It was called Psycho-Cybernetics. Was written.
Oh, I remember that one.
Yeah,
sure.
And it was a plastic surgeon who was, when he did the work on the people, as far as facially, they had entirely new self-images because they saw the fact that they didn't have that wart or that mole or whatever it was that brought them down. And it's like, and I still think of that today. But one of the things that I remember Dr. Maltz had mentioned was where you say breathe in the color, which I still use, he said have a little quiet room mentally that you go into for 10 or 15 minutes, and you just kind of pull everything together, and you drink some tea, and you kind of pull everything back. And I'll tell you, it's like, I think you're adding a great new, shall we say, lift and flavor to that, but it's really the same old 6s and 7s, and that's what I really like.
Well, I think, this is really, an ancient practice. People have been meditating for thousands of years. In ancient Egypt, when people were sick, they would go to sleep temples, and the priestess would induce some kind of hypnotic trance, and people would go into this kind of sleep-like state where they would be visited by, gods and goddesses of healing. And, in that kind of healing state of trance, they would be comforted, and they would wake up in the morning, and they would be more at peace. And I think that, when we go into that quiet room, or, sometimes I call it your place of inner safety, or sometimes they call it a happy place, I think that, all of our emotions are stored as molecules. And so when we go into that quiet room, we're really activating those molecules of quiet and comfort and tranquility. So we're actually giving ourselves, kind of like a nutritional supplement that we're generating through our own brain chemistry. So it's a natural and organic way of getting into a secure kind of inner state of well-being. Another thing that can help you to do that I also write about in the book as an emotional first aid, kind of a tool, is to light a candle and to just look at the flame for 5 minutes and listen to music if you enjoy listening to relaxing music, because sometimes, your thoughts will be racing, especially think about people who lost their homes in Hurricane Florence or Hurricane Michael. You have to make survival decisions while you're in shock, or people in the wildfires.
Momentarily,
in California.
yes.
You have to make survival decisions while you're in shock. So if you take 5 minutes a day and find, I'm sure that somebody will have a candle somewhere in their emergency go kit, and just sit there for 5 minutes and just focus on the flame, that will have an instant calming effect. It will lower your blood pressure. It will calm your heart rate. And it will give you a sense that everything is going to be okay, because you're accessing those molecules of well-being that are stored inside your emotional brain. It's called the limbic system, where all our emotions are stored as molecules. And we can activate them, just like we can activate the molecules of agitation by sitting and watching the news for too many hours.
And I imagine social media here could be a, shall we say, a notable culprit in all of this.
Well, I think that, I myself, I find that certain social media
is beneficial.
You and I met on social media. I've made some very nice friendships and connections through social media.
We all have.
But it can cause a lot of agitation, and certainly it can be used to manipulate people into states of anger or rage or fear. It's a tremendous source of misinformation. We used to joke, and I think you probably heard this joke when we were in the news business back in the 80s, the 70s, the 80s, or somebody would say to you, well, I saw it on the news, so it must be true.
Right.
Or I read it in the newspaper, so it must be true. And now, I love it when people say to me, I read it on the internet, so it must be true. And it's very hard not to laugh, because I think it's very hard to know what's true and what's not true on the internet. And Wikipedia, there were no fact checkers in Wikipedia.
No.
Somebody puts an entry in. There's a page for you, and the biographical information might or might not be accurate. Anybody can go in and update a Wikipedia page. It's kind of like a free-for-all right now when it comes to information. So here we have, social media, which is a great superhighway for making social connections. But it's also the Wild West, because there are a lot of people there are a lot of false identities on social media. There are a lot of people who are pretending to be other people, or they're, I get these every couple of weeks. Somebody will write that some relative of mine, who's not really a relative, has left me 5,000 British pounds, and all I have to do is, call this number, and, they give them my bank account number, and, the pounds will be released to me. Unfortunately, I know people who've actually believed that.
Have done it.
And have, given out their banking information, and, of course, never received their 5,000 pounds.
Yeah, and
So,
parted with a few on the way.
Yeah.
Wow, and I'll tell you, this has really been a lot of fun as things develop. With your agreement, of course, Dr. Laurie, I'd like to have you come back and talk about other things, because we're sure to see them happen. In our closing moments together, I know a lot of our friends and fans on the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network would like to meet you and read your book and follow you. Where can they do that?
Well, my website is Laurie Nadel. That's my name, LaurieNadel.com. And I'll have some news of upcoming workshops that I'll be doing in Florida and New York in the spring. You can follow me at Dr. Laurie on Twitter. That's DRLAURIE. Laurie Nadel on Instagram. And you can find me on LinkedIn also at Dr. Laurie Nadel. The Five Gifts has a Facebook page, but I am Facebook phobic, having had some very uncomfortable experiences there. So I stay off Facebook, and you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn.
Dr. Laurie, it's been a pleasure. Just so you know, this will go out for broadcast, then it'll be processed and come back to me, and I will give it to you to use and share as you wish, and I'm honored to speak with you today, and thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you. I'm honored to be your guest. I would love to come back, and thank you so much.
Thanks, Dr. Laurie. Take care now.
Thank you, too.
Bye now.
When you've got a job to do, reach for something good to chew. Chewing helps you stand the pace, anytime and any place. So, hi-ho, hey, hey, chew your little troubles away. Hi-ho, hey, hey, chew Wrigley Spearmint Gum. Work goes faster, smoother too. Life seems brighter when you chew. Hi-ho, hey, hey, chew Wrigley Spearmint Gum. It's good to sink your teeth into Wrigley Spearmint Gum. That lively flavor freshens your mouth, and the good chewing helps make the job go smoother and faster. Enjoy chewing Wrigley Spearmint Gum every day, as millions do. Hi-ho, hey, hey, chew your little troubles away. Hi-ho, hey, hey, chew Wrigley Spearmint Gum.
Well, in discussing the indomitable Brits with Dr. Laurie Nadel, I thought we'd go out with a little British music. This is one of my favorites of all time. Mary Hopkin, goodbye. Sort of a brief but brilliant career with Apple about 50 years ago, a protege of Paul McCartney. Special thanks to Dr. Laurie Nadel and our retromercials, Anison and Wrigley, and all of the friends and fans of the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. I couldn't do it without you, and every week I want to do it because of you. We'll be back next week, guest undetermined, and we've got some very interesting shows coming up. So as Dan Ingram would say on WABC Music Radio 77 in New York, Keuskade, which is a Swedish goodbye. How about a Pomfret, Connecticut goodbye? This is Tony D'Angelo on the PM Coast to Coast show. We'll see you real soon. God bless everybody. Take care.